Hi everyone, it's Chenso from Reality Art Pod, here for night 4 of the Survivor 50 Classic Episode Marathon. Tonight we're watching Survivor South Pacific, Episode 15, titled Loyalties Will Be Broken, keeping an eye on Season 50 players Coach and Ozzy. If you like this video, you'll love my same-day recaps of Survivor 50, so consider liking and subscribing, and using my link to try Paramount Plus for free. But let's dive into it. Here's where we're at. At this point, Coach's Upolu Alliance has come out on top over Ozzy's Savais. Ozzy's been voted out twice, and has been playing the game on Redemption Island. Coach gave Ozzy his word as a Christian man. He'll take him to Final 3 if he returns from Redemption. Last week, Brandon gave up his immunity to Albert and was voted out, leaving a final 6 of Rick, Sophie, Coach, and Albert in the game, and Ozzy and Brandon on Redemption. But let's dive into it. Brandon joins Ozzy on Redemption, filling Ozzy in that he fell on his sword for Albert, and Albert backstabbed him. Brandon has a great attitude about being voted out, too great actually. Ozzy tells us Brandon is playing his game like he's playing with God and not human beings. Back at camp, Sophie tells us that Brandon made a stupid move, and Albert looks like a coward for not giving the necklace back in front of the jury. Coach is infuriated that Albert lied to him, telling us that he's tired of people having a holier-than-thou attitude, which is so insanely hypocritical coming from him this season. Coach tells Albert off, saying he's tired of being made a fool of, and he just goes on and on. Albert even has a confessional drowning out Coach, muffledly continuing to yell at him. We're left to assume it went on for a while. Legend has it Coach is still yelling at Albert to this day. Ozzy and Brandon learn it's time for their final duel with an audience of the 4 other players. They go to the arena, and you've got to be kidding me. The challenge to get back into the game is Ozzy's specialty, holding onto this pole for as long as they can, and the last player hanging returns to the game. Was there even a point of them playing this at this point? So they get this farce started. I can't imagine anyone watching this live felt any suspense, despite their best efforts. Every time Ozzy adjusts, they make it seem like he's slipping, but Brandon slides and eventually falls. He did give it his all. Brandon says he won the game because after 7 days, he had a heart-to-heart with God and has a cheery exit. So we lose Brandon here in 6th place, who joined the cast as Russell Hance's nephew with the tattoo, Lil Hance. I always found him a weird character because he says his uncle was like Hitler, which is a crazy thing to say about your uncle. And I don't even think that's a fair comparison. Brandon is an odd guy. It was weird when he targeted Michaela because he was worried he'd be tempted by her beauty. Was Survivor a good experience for Brandon? This was reckless casting. He doesn't seem to be in a very good place. And then to bring him back the second time after, and again, it doesn't go well for him. For a Where Are They Now, he was recently arrested on charges of racketeering and arson in 2025, which is unfortunate as he talked even on this season about his history with gangs. He's currently awaiting trial and is presumed innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Moving on. So Ozzy rejoins the game to an awkward welcome from the Upolus, who are going to vote him out the second he loses immunity. Coach congratulates Ozzy and reaffirms to Ozzy that if he wins immunity, he'll use his hidden immunity idol, that by the way he has, to save Ozzy. Ozzy knows that it would be ridiculous to believe Coach, and that he absolutely needs to win his way to the end. After making this promise to Ozzy, Coach feels he's got the game stitched up. Everyone wants to take him to Final 3, telling us it's his game to lose. They head to their immunity challenge. Sorry, Albert, that thang is back up for grabs. Players will pull a lever to steady their table, while using the other hand to stack a tower high enough to hit their mark. The first player to finish wins immunity. They get started. Sophie is focused, telling Jeff she has a book about how to make card stacks. Very specific interest. Jeff calls Sophie's tower indestructible, but she runs out of pieces and has to rebuild her tower. It's very clear that it's Sophie versus Ozzy in a showdown. Sophie encourages Albert to drop his stack and come help her, which was to me the most memorable moment in this episode. Jeff tells them this is an individual challenge and has to stay this way, though the rules of helping are inconsistent. How would Albert helping Sophie pick up her pieces be any different from Liz helping Kenzie grab her plank in the 46 immunity challenge? But anyway, Ozzy wins this immunity challenge and the other 4 are shaking in their boots. Back at camp, Ozzy is relishing in his win and watching the Upolus turn on each other. He feels he's going to come out looking like the good guy no matter what. Coach tells Albert that Rick is the biggest jury threat left, proposing that they target Rick because he's hardworking, loyal, and honest. Ozzy is starting trouble, fanning the flames against Sophie, telling Albert that Sophie's a threat and a brat, as seen in the challenge today when she was bossing Albert around. Albert is thinking about targeting Sophie with Ozzy, agreeing that she's a jury threat. Perceptive Rick notices Coach avoiding him. Now he knows he's in trouble, saying he sees right through Coach. But Coach tells Rick he will not vote for him. Ozzy continues his campaign against Sophie and Coach, telling Albert that Coach gave Ozzy his word as a Christian man, that he'd take Ozzy to the end. Albert brings this right back to Coach. Coach denies it and says they need to get troublemaker Ozzy out. So they head to tribal council, where the jury gets to see Ozzy wearing the necklace. The jury at this point are riding so hard for Ozzy at Ponderosa after he fed them all on Redemption Island. Jeff reminds Coach that tonight is the last night he can play his idol, which he's wearing around his neck. So it's between Rick, Sophie, and Albert. Sophie argues they should keep her because she's good in challenges and can can help them to beat Ozzy. Rick's argument is that Ozzy should keep him around because Ozzy can beat him in the end, but Rick doesn't campaign to the others besides Ozzy, which is weird. Sophie says they should get rid of Rick because he's weak in challenges. Coach says they're a family and a strong group. Brandon laughs at Coach when he's preaching loyalty. Ozzy tries to call out Coach, saying that Coach promised to take him to the end. Ozzy is making a good point, but they don't even talk about this topic because Sophie interrupts and changes the subject to saying she wants Ozzy out because he doesn't respect her and doesn't talk to her. Ozzy responds to that, saying Sophie acts like a spoiled brat and that everyone on Redemption calls her bratty and lazy, and says he's heard that she's been calling him arrogant, which she doesn't deny. Jeff says, Sophie, I don't get why you care that Ozzy talks crap about you when you do the same thing to him. And Jeff digs deeper, getting Sophie to admit that she's getting criticism she's not used to, and she starts crying, feeling hurt by Ozzy saying that everyone is talking about her. I don't think Jeff kind of calling her out helped how she was feeling. She admits that she's learning weaknesses that she didn't know that she had, and worries that everyone sees her as a selfish, spoiled bitch. This is humanizing her to the jury. Dawn's over there crying. I want you to take out your teeth, Dawn.
I want you to take out your teeth, Dawn. Yeah, I'm not gonna, Dawn, take out your teeth. There they are.
So Sophie's breakdown becomes the entirety of this tribal, but Ozzy is definitely frustrated because he wasn't able to air out Coach's dirty laundry, but they head to the vote. Then Coach chooses not to use his idol, and there's 2 votes in that thing for Sophie from Rick and Ozzy, and 3 votes for Rick from Sophie, Albert, and Coach. On his way out, Rick refuses a handshake from Coach, and in his exit confessional, Rick says Coach is pissing down his back and telling him it's raining, saying Ozzy has his vote. So we say goodbye to Rick here, who's such a random Survivor player to make it to the final 5. He doesn't seem very interested in playing the game. Despite saying he applied 14 times, I can't tell you a single thing he did besides being in this alliance. Personally, I always found it jarring that he looks so much like Ron Swanson from Parks and Rec, but doesn't have Ron Swanson's exact personality, which is an unrealistic standard that I put on Rick. This man is a mystery. There's nothing on Google about him since 2011, and I'm not the kind of channel that's going to research Rick past page 1 of Google. The next day, Ozzy tells us his plan A and plan B are to win. He's gathering coconuts and drinking as many as he can to prepare himself for the challenge. I love this example of Ozzy using his providing as an asset to himself in a case where he truly can get a slight edge by fueling his body. Coach talks to Ozzy, telling Ozzy that when he gave Ozzy his word as a Christian man, it was under the contingency that he didn't tell people about it. So in Coach's opinion, when Ozzy told Albert, the deal was off. I see Coach's point, kind of, but it also seems like Coach is trying to revise history to cover up his own lies. Ozzy shares with us he has trust issues from being backstabbed in the past and tells Coach he feels he can't trust anyone. Ozzy tells Coach he wants to tie the vote and make Albert and Sophie make fire. Coach says he likes the idea and they hug it out. That's nice. Players head to their final immunity challenge. Sorry, Ozzy, that thing's up for grabs. Players will race through a multi-sectioned obstacle course to collect 5 bags of puzzle pieces, then solve their flower puzzle. The first player to complete this wins immunity. They get started. These obstacles are no joke, especially this little ditty. Coach does what Jeff calls the fireman role. Ozzy is leading the group. These obstacles are nothing for Ozzy, who gets his 5th bag first and has a giant time advantage on this puzzle, but this puzzle is Ozzy's kryptonite. He just can't figure it out. Sophie gets the first piece, and from there it all comes together, leading to Sophie winning final immunity and a spot in the final 3. The Opolus celebrate. Ozzy is clearly hurt, knowing he's cooked. Back at camp, Ozzy is upset, crying in confessional, telling us he's not going to give up, he's gonna try, but he even hears in his confessional the others cheering. Coach is knighting Sophie as the new dragon slayer. Albert calls Ozzy the villain and the bad guy, which not a good take. Sophie tells us she and Albert are definitely voting Ozzy out, and the only question is if Coach will help Ozzy and tie the vote. Ozzy makes a final push, asking Coach for the chance to make fire against Albert. Coach is dropping hints to Ozzy that it's not looking good, telling Ozzy again the excuse that Ozzy betrayed him, and in confessional, Coach tells us he's said from the beginning that he wants to bring the best to the end, and Ozzy is the best. Ozzy reminds Coach he gave his word as a Christian man he was going to keep him. So they head to tribal. The mood is awful. Ozzy having to face his fans in the jury without the necklace, so that sucks. Ozzy says if Coach is a man of his word, he'll tie the vote and send Ozzy to fire. Coach explains his dilemma that he wants strong people in the end, but he also feels his alliance is strong. So they get to voting. In the end, there's 1 vote in that thing for Albert from Ozzy and 3 for Ozzy from Sophie, Albert, and Coach. The jury gives Ozzy a round of applause on the way out. So this ends Ozzy's journey on this season, by far his best game. The entire season is designed for him. Redemption Island was a twist that basically guaranteed Ozzy Final 5, but Ozzy's tribe was by far the better team on paper by way of challenges, and while people say Ozzy has bad strategy, he forms a tight alliance who adore him, sends himself to Redemption Island, and comes back, which helped spare his alliance and keep them grateful. Had Cochran not turned on them, which wasn't even in Cochran's best interest, I think Ozzy wins the game. And if he won that final immunity, he wins as well. But he didn't win that immunity, so I can't say he was robbed, but he deserves credit for a good game played, especially the work he was doing on Redemption Island to butter up the jury. And he was pushing it in the finale to try to cause trouble with the Apollos to save himself if he lost immunity. He would have won if he hadn't lost. Back at camp, the final three celebrate there being no more Ozzy. Coach is giving us quotes, but doesn't remember who he's quoting, which is very unlike Coach. He's off his game. They get breakfast in the morning that they have to cook themselves. If I'm 39 days into Survivor, I want cooked pancakes, and they better be fluffy or I send them back. Coach and Sophie agree they played better than Albert, pointing out that Albert has played a sneaky game. Sophie plans to gather her emotions at Tribal, so the jury doesn't think she's crazy. Albert is very confident that he played the best game. Coach has a moment of Coach Chi, reflecting on his journey from the Fool in his first season, the Dragon on Heroes vs. Villains, and now he wants to be the dragon being destroyed to the Phoenix rising from the ashes above the misery. That was complicated. They burn down their camp. I hate when they burn down the camp. You're gonna burn down the whole ecosystem. Players head to Final Tribal, starting with opening statements, where Albert says he loved the social experiment and meeting everyone, and a higher power brought everyone here together. Sophie starts with an old chestnut, outwit, outplay, outlast, saying she won 3 immunities, worked hard to keep her 5-person alliance to the end, and owns that her social game needs some work. Coach says the first time he played was with arrogance and self-righteousness, but now he's played with respect. Ozzy gets things started, telling them that no one wants to vote for any of them, again calling Sophie a brat, but saying she can change. He says Albert was in the right place at the right time and did nothing. Finally addressing Coach, saying he's giving Coach the chance to either win or lose, telling Coach that his honor is a bunch of bull, and asking Coach if he really played the way that he said. Coach responds, saying he played most of the game honorably, but there were times when he was dishonorable, which I felt was the best way he could have answered this question. Jim asks Albert to answer a question without starting with a compliment, so of course he starts right off with a compliment, which makes people laugh at him at this point. Albert is out of the running. Dawn asks Sophie about her alliance. Sophie says she noticed that men in the game can get 2 young girls to follow them around, and she saw Coach as the equivalent of a young girl who would be loyal to her. Major clowning on Coach, and great answer. Rick calls Coach out for being dishonorable, asking Coach what he has to say for himself. Coach simply apologizes, which I felt was appropriate. Refusing to apologize in this moment would be silly. Brandon takes a shot at Coach, saying Coach promised as a man of God he'd never vote Brandon out. Then he did. Coach reassures Brandon that Brandon was a man of God, and that Brandon's religion was a rally cry for their alliance. Brandon also gets annoyed when Albert doesn't give him a yes or no answer. Not only is Albert not able to say yes or no, but then he says he didn't know Brandon was going home, which is an obvious lie. If Albert could get whatever negative jury votes are, he would achieve it. The Comedy Central roast of the final 3 continues when Whitney says Albert is sleazy, Coach used Christianity to manipulate his tribe, and calls Sophie condescending. Sophie owns that her personality needs work, and she didn't realize these were problems until they told her, and commits to being better back home. Edna gives them credit for using religion to dupe them, saying they came there to be duped. Edna has a great attitude. I mean, I would probably be pissed off, but good for Edna. They talk about Coach's idol. Sophie reveals that the group staged a discovery of the idol that they already found to trick Brandon, which is a surprise revelation, but kind of makes them all look bad, but especially Coach. Cochran tasks Coach to describe his strategy without talking about honor. Coach says he came in wanting to do the right things, tried to please everyone, and did all the wrong things, and was trying to justify his actions throughout. He says he's a terrible strategist, and it came to bite him. Sophie says she was Coach's strategist. This answer from Coach was awful. How are you gonna sit in front of the jury and say I'm a terrible strategist? They get to voting. We see a voting confessional where Cochran votes for Coach, saying if you take away the honor and integrity, Coach played the best game and should stop apologizing. And Dawn tells Sophie she thinks she's gonna have a million reasons to smile.
I think you have a million reasons to smile.
Take out your teeth, Dawn.
Yeah, I'm not gonna do that.
Where's your Christmas spirit, Dawn?
There they are.
We go to the live show for the reveal. Very upset, no journey from Jeff on a jet ski. And this man, Jeff, ahead of In the Hands of the Fans, tells the fans, I know you want me to do this again. Not doing it. I don't ride jet skis anymore. I don't ride in a helicopter from Fiji to New York City. Take out your teeth, Jeff. Not me becoming more and more unhinged throughout this marathon. Jeff reads the votes. There's 3 votes in that thing for Coach, from Rick, Edna, and Cochran. The other 6 votes from Ozzy, Brandon, Whitney, Dawn, Keith, and Jim go to Sophie. So by a vote of 6 to 3 to -9, Sophie Sophie is the winner of Survivor South Pacific. So let's talk about these players. Starting with Albert, such a confusing individual who seems to think he's running the entire season despite really not. Not self-aware. It's crazy he couldn't answer that question with a yes or no, but he seems to have reflected on this a lot and over time owned his mistakes. He's branded zero vote finalist. His Instagram name is Zero Votes, and he recently did some podcasts with dating advice. So if you need dating advice, you know a guy. This ends Coach's trilogy, coming into the season where I think the show wanted Coach to find redemption. He came in with that mindset, and to some extent, he found it, not being taken seriously in either of his past seasons, coming here and leading a successful alliance. But the narrative is instead him making all these promises and being very hypocritical at every turn, so it's hard to tell another story. He did run the game though. Convincing Cochran to change his vote was the move that got his alliance to the end of the game. He gets to a point where he's made so many agreements that he has to go back on his word to people. In this finale, Coach had an opportunity in the tribal where Rick went home to start battling this by addressing it when Ozzy brought it up, but he doesn't. Then again at the next tribal, so he comes into final tribal with the Savai's and Brandon strongly opinionated against him and not even understanding his game in a way they can respect. And then he just folds in the end, basically saying you guys are right, I suck at life and don't deserve to win. Where I think the best case to make would be owning it. Say I was running the game and made the biggest move of the game. I made promises along the way and I was playing the game so well that I brought all my allies to the end and unfortunately had to break my word when I had no other choice. He just lies down and dies in the end, which is so uncoach-like. I wish he fully embraced the Dragon Slayer in this episode. And our winner in Sophie, who was under-edited this season. I never felt like we're watching the story of why Sophie won, but why all the others lost. It's not until the finale where she starts really picking up steam. Like, the jurors were all telling Ozzy that she was a brat at redemption, and she had to find out about that right in front of the jury. That moment of her breaking down was catharsis for the jury that gave them some resolution of her being a brat. Had that breakdown not happened, they could have taken her being a brat out on her with some telling offs at Final Tribal and not voting for her to win. But through this quick character development, she raises her win equity. Beating Ozzy in that immunity helped her case, but I don't think that's why she won. She's not excellent socially or in the game on the beach, but she's extremely intelligent and well-spoken. She won the game basically through performances at Tribal, and after this season, you'll notice players in the last few Tribals trying to force these character moments and grow in the lead up to the final to soften up the jury, which is Sophie's greatest lasting legacy. Circling back to the season 50 players, this dynamic between Coach and Ozzy needs to be explored more. There's no way this beef is really settled. Coach lied to Ozzy and took away his chance at winning the show, and Coach didn't even win himself, which if I were Ozzy would be worse. Coach will likely never forget that Ozzy accused him of going against his word as a Christian man. Ozzy would come back for Game Changers, but didn't really have a story there, so this season was both of their true final stories before 50. And I think this episode does do a good job of getting you informed on these two players. But that's all I have to say about this episode. Let me know in the comments what you thought of the episode. Coach and Ozzy, Sophie winning. Also, who said the thing? I watched this episode twice, could not catch the episode title. The first person who could tell me who said the episode title and when, I'll mail you a free sticker. If you like this video, consider liking and subscribing. We'll be back tomorrow night where we're picking up with Chrissy on Heroes, Healers, and Hustlers. Until then, you know where to find me. Bye.